In a world where Africans have lost their roots, it has become of vital importance to document our ways. In an effort to reverse the brainwashing of the past, where we were made to believe our ways are demonic, we are pressed to create dignified and respectful platforms to unpack our spiritual ways. Umoya ulight, umoya upright. Welcome back, everybody. We've had a nice small break and we are back with a vengeance. You know how we do here. We come from an oral tradition as Africans. So we call our elders to come and get our history, to get our food, rightfully so, because at these schools that they take us to, we're not getting the right information. So MOYA is that platform for us to make sure that the African child, although is going to these schools, is also going to this school. Thank you so much for all your contributions. Please continue to do so. The episodes are because you guys are watching. Continue to like, share, and subscribe and talk about the channel. And please join in all the activities. We've got MOYA hiking, we've got spirit, MOYA spirit chats going on. So join whatever WhatsApp group you are most inclined towards. Thank you once again for joining us on MOYA. Kamalam Ntsiki Mazwai. It's a great privilege once again to bring a great person into the room, because Abelungu choose for us who our heroes are. We have to work extra hard, especially with people who are not as animated and as celebrity as others. So we have to look out for our greatness because it does come in quieter forms and more reserved forms, and it's wisdom that we're going to miss out on if we don't pay attention. I've got, I don't know if I should, it's senior counsel, and we don't even know what these senior counsel things mean or anything, but we know that these are important titles. Adv Muzi Sikhakhane, enkosi kakhulu for agreeing to come to be on the platform. Molo tata. Ninjani. As I was saying that, other people have got personality and they can sell themselves and we see them and, but some greatness goes quietly and we actually have to pay attention to see who our heroes are. And I think that is the case with you.
Thank you.
So we have to kind of I really had to. So thank you very, very much. We do honor you and we do appreciate you and we are looking forward to a conversation. So here on MOYA, we like to get to know the person and the journey of the person so that we can actually be in your step and walk the rest of. So where did you start? Where are you from? Uzalwephi,
Yeah, it's a conflict about which Pumapi. So it ends claim me. And people in KZN claim me, but ngizalelwe eBhulwa, actually. It's in KZN, it's south of Pietermaritzburg, towards the Transkei, Mausuga. Yeah, so between Pietermaritzburg and Umzimkhulu, those areas, it's quieter, serene, rural places. That's where I was born, actually. In those, it's those places where productive land is owned by 2 white farmers and hundreds of villagers are thrown down there to share land, unproductive land with the donkeys. That's where I come from. And that's the story of all rural life. And then I didn't leave KZN ceremoniously as a student. Well, as a young teacher.
You grew up in a home?
I grew up in a home, a very rural, poor home. Very, very, very
no gogo
place. No, mama.
Okay.
Yeah, uncle, so mama. My father died when I was 10, so it's a rural community. It's called the Mangwaneni. That's where it is. It's a small area, and very, very few people would think I come from there, but I do. And in Kulele, in that setup, just as a rural boy, Catholic, like all of us, believe you me, I was an altar boy.
I can believe you.
And so I grew up in that environment, which is
Did you have
Probably.
siblings?
Yeah, we are 5. I'm the last one. As you can see, I'm spoiled. I'm
Last
the last born.
Okay.
Yeah, so I have my eldest sister, a second one, and then a brother who's late, and then my sister, and then myself.
Okay.
So I'm the last one, but it's a poor area, forgotten areas. Probably is the place that inspired what I do and see and say.
Why do you say that?
Because it's a place of glaring South African inequalities at their worst, right? It's a place where the community lives in stony, unproductive land, and you hear that they were removed from the flat, productive land when the farmers and the colonialists landed and moved them through collaboration with chiefs. And so anyway, even when you're 10 years old, you're born into that. You're born into something. You're surrounded by mountains. That's the first thing. And of course, the mountains have a funny way of making you feel as a youngster, that's your world, right? And so what you see there is what shapes you. And so when I say it makes me what I am and what I think and what I speak, is that when you live with such inequality, you grow up into it. You grow into poverty, into a parent who's not working, who works for other people in the community, or if not for a farmer, Mr. Ruth up the mountain. You then see those glaring inequalities and you start questioning. All young minds question. You start questioning, yini abantu behlala kanje kunomlungu oyedwa up the mountain where they work, behola 5 cents. I don't even know 5 cents.
I do know 5 cents.
So it's that environment. So I grew up into that. And missionaries, because we're Catholics, staunch Catholics at home. Let me say I have a Catholic background, but I have my own views about religion now. But that on its own creates, because you see that and you question it. You question. People think I'm obsessed with the questions of race, but you're born into a situation where the community you live in has nothing. And the only person with something is white, who's a farmer, or the priest in your missionary church. So if you are inquisitive, you've got to ask, even when you are 5 years old, you've got to see that strangeness of things, so that's where I grew up and went to primary school there, started at different places. I think I finished my high school in 1983 at a boarding school, prestigious boarding school. I don't know how I got there, called Polela Institute.
What do you mean prestigious? Because when you say 1983, then you say prestigious boarding school. Yeah, we are from a generation where...
Yeah, I'm going to explain that to you.
Thank you.
Even those days, there were boarding schools that were regarded as top. And I don't mean multiracial or Model C. It's one of those boarding schools where I regret that I went there, where middle-class kids go to, children of nurses, of teachers. Mm-hmm. And so it's the only place where I got to live with people who were, well, I almost said wealthier than I am, who were middle class. I share a boarding room with them, 14 of them. And they have nice things like roll-on, soap, toothbrush, underpants, socks, and you don't have any of those. So in a way, you get to see it's a continuation of you seeing another world. Another class of people. They are like you, but it's a completely different class. They are not wealthy. So when I say it's prestigious, I don't mean it's a wealthy school, but from where I came from, a child of a teacher was wealthy, or a child of a nurse. Anyone with 2 pairs of socks was rich. And so that's the high school I went to. And then immediately after that, I wanted to be a priest. And that shouldn't come as a shock. And the college I wanted to go to, it's called Fetsam College for Priesthood. And of course, in my childhood, I didn't realize that that college did not take people who were Catholics. So after that disappointment for a couple of days, and then I went to study as a teacher. Finished that. And I had started my activism already in that age of 16, 17, 18. Discovered when I was about to teach, when I finished, I had been in detention those years of 84, 85, 86. But I managed to pass.
What was the activism work?
I was one of the student leaders even from 1984. I was a member of an organization called the Azanian Student Organization. Mm-hmm. And I was a leader in the area of Midlands. And so...
This is you are 19.
Gee, no, I'm actually 17.
Oh.
I was actually 17 when I think I became formally politicized. It means in structures of students, of youth. And before...
How did these structures work? How did you guys organize yourself? Please, can you paint the picture?
Originally, let me say from high school, I had many people who were with me at high school know this sort of shy, quiet little boy who only spoke when there was some political thing to be said. Because even there, it was a school where for the first time I was taught by, it's a missionary school, Presbyterian school, white teachers. And I had good relations with them, but already I had just noticed skewed relations, skewed patterns of relations between black and white, and it bothered me. And I can say from that age, I was, even from when you will not believe this, even when I was 10, I think I was very big on questioning why Africans live the way they do. Why is it that when we're 10 years old in this Catholic church at St. Paul's where I went, we are told to wear like this, a jacket and everything, and we dress up and we queue for the Holy Communion. And 8 dirty white people and their children from the farm don't queue. And the priest shifts to give them Holy Communion. And I think one of my first really rebellious experiences was moving from the queue when I was 10 to the queue where white farmers were queuing because the priest had moved to take Holy Communion, to the embarrassment of my mom and everybody in the church. So
what happened? Tell that story. You can't just brush over it.
I actually moved to the queue because it bothered me that we are told to dress up nicely because we're black.
Yeah.
And then people wearing short pants, vests, dirty with cow dung on the shoes, gets the best treatment. The German priests moves to serve them first. And so it had bothered me for some time, not that it was happening for the first time. And so I shifted to this queue, of course, as I said, to the utter embarrassment from my mom and everybody else in the church. And I was grabbed by some woman, one of those old mama bumhlangan. Grab you back here. And then I shifted back there. And I wanted to see if the priest would serve.
And the black people are grabbing you.
Yes, of course. And that pattern, I'll tell you, continues today.
Right?
When you challenge whiteness, it's black people who feel embarrassed. And so I was moved back, and I moved back there because I wanted to see what the priest would do. And he didn't serve me. All right?
What?
And I left. I moved out, and I waited outside. Now, so from that age, I was very, very observant of glaring, differentiated treatment of human beings because of class and race, sometimes ethnicity when I met other groups. But where I grew up, ethnicity is not big because it's those areas in Mzimkhulu that are almost rural cosmopolitan with the Mulifes, the Mukwenas, the Khadebe. So it's not very big on tribes, on ethnicity, but race was glaring. So in a way, so when I go to to study to be a teacher, I'm already like some kind of informal black consciousness inspired 16-year-old. And so when I get there, I get attracted to, of course, activism, which is more formal. You know.
Was there anybody like guiding this, or this is just all organic?
Well, in 1984 happened to be an interesting year because there was that break in the struggle in this country when, since the death of Steve Biko, there was a bit of a lull. If you think about it. And then in the 70s, Inkatha had emerged in Natal then as a completely cultural movement whose political motives seemed unclear to me. And I had already started being uncomfortable with what I thought was ethnic mobilization that seemed to collaborate with the apartheid system. And so even at that age, I sort of had rejected that. So what happened then is that there was an emergence of the United Democratic Front around that time, 83, when I was doing Standard 10. So I go into tertiary during that period when organizations are being mobilized to form this front. And students were at the forefront of this as well, and young people. So it's the first time I'm recruited into an organized formation of students, which was the Azanian Student Organization. I think that happened in my first 2 months there, actually. And then I became a leader of that branch and then of the region.
How are you the leader when you're so quiet?
Leadership is a different thing. I think leadership is action. And leadership is living. And leadership is following. You can't lead if you can't follow. And I think I could lead or can lead because I can follow. But in a way, is that I think I must say I was probably the youngest at that institution. But I think my strength was more on theory. I had not been in urban areas where people were toy-toying, but I had spent my time just understanding the theory of politics and what had been happening to Africans. And I had observed what I called is the double role of missionaries where I was born, where they are the God's ambassadors, but also the go-between between the colonial powers and our people and taking their land. And so I had that kind of theoretical foundation. And so I became a leader in that way. I don't know what people saw, but my activism those years were in the student movement largely. But right there, I was also recruited into the underground of the ANC at that age when I was a teenager. And so in a way, it was difficult for me because I was more black consciousness orientated. And I was recruited into an organization that seemed, even though I was young, to reject this notion. And I got confused a bit. In fact, my very first meeting, I was wearing a T-shirt with Bigo's head, with a Bigo frame that I had been given by Mrs. Mklenge. So I wore this. And I went to this first underground meeting. Very excited. But everyone was looking at me suspiciously. And then a guy called Reggie Khadebe, who had recruited me. Reggie was probably the first ANC chairperson after the unbanning in Natal. And at the end, I said, Reggie, why were people giving me the looks? He says, it's your T-shirt. I said, I thought they would be proud. He says, yeah, there's a problem, Comrade Muzi, with the Black Consciousness Movement and the UDF, and you will get to understand it. I was so confused that there was a tension between Black consciousness and people in the UDF. And so in a way...
Black people.
And Black people, I was so confused about it, and I still am, but I better understand now why the ideology of Black consciousness became a victim of other formations. I do understand now. I didn't understand then. It confused me. But as soon as I understood that politics is It's a battle of contestations, even amongst those who pretend they are struggling. It's a battle of contestations about dominance. And I think the suppression of black consciousness is probably the most unfortunate things that ever happened to the struggle for liberation. And I think if the ANC must ever regret anything, is distancing itself even a little from black consciousness and Pan-Africanism, because those two ideologies would have made our struggle more meaningful. Yeah. And so when I finished teaching, I discovered that I couldn't teach. I was not allowed to teach.
Oh, okay.
I was banned without my knowledge. Remember, I just wanted to be able to finish and be a teacher, buy my mother a stove and stereo, which was not there at home, and a few pots. Truly, those were my modest things I wanted to do. Then I discovered I can't teach. In fact, in one school in Tuzuma, I went in, the principal wanted an English teacher, because I did English and music and history. And I introduced me to a class. It's a high school. I forget its name. And he went to submit my name and came back 2 hours later to say, by the way, I'm not allowed to employ you. I was shuttered. Right? And then anyway, in KZN, in Natal.
Why were you not to be allowed?
Because I had been active as a student in student politics, and I had been detained. I just didn't know.
So you were blacklisted?
I was blacklisted. I just didn't know. Then I ended up teaching, because Natal was a funny place. The IFP claims that it didn't take independence, but it was a self-governing state with schools that were under the KwaZulu government and others under the central government. So this was the school under the central government in Durban that didn't take me. And then I went home, shuttered. I'm like maybe 19 or 20, just graduated. I can't work. And then I went to district offices in the KwaZulu schools where I was born. And they took me, a principal was there looking for an English teacher. I ended up teaching Zulu, English, Afrikaans, and all of that in that school. But it was in the heartland of Inkatha people. I don't call them IFP because the IFP is a name that emerges much later. And in this school, I ended up teaching during school hours and organized literacy lessons for the community in the afternoon. But of course, I think because I'm a political person, I was very unhappy with organizations coming to recruit and stop schooling. And as a result, to cut a long story short, that's how I came to Joburg. I was attacked by a group of people while I was teaching, shot and stabbed me, stabbed a few students that I taught. And that's how I end up in the streets of Joburg. In fact, it was exactly today. It was the 21st of November, 1987.
Oh, my gosh.
Because I was attacked on the 12th of November in the schoolyard by a bus load full of people purporting to be Inkatha supporters because they said I was teaching politics. I was just teaching every subject. I just loved teaching. And so in a way, that's how I end up in Joburg, to cut a long story short. I actually slept first in something that was called Kanya College in Bree Street. We were hiding there. That's where I met people like Ace Makashule, Thabo Manyoni. A lot of MK people were hiding there because I had been attacked. I was hiding there. Most of them didn't know me. I quietly slept there. I was on my way out of the country. And I spent a week or two with them. I'm alone. It's December. I'm 20-year-old.
How did you get from KZN to...
I took a train. In fact, I had 2 bullets in my legs and I had been stabbed.
What?
And some journalist in the Natal Witness, I think, had written a story that I had been killed, but I hadn't, as you see, I'm here.
Oh, what?
So there was a story that I had been killed. It was a big story.
Wait, you have to tell the story properly. So they come, the people story. Come and they shoot
really
out.
Want to hear this
we
story?
Are here for you.
Okay. You know, a kid comes at about 8:30 in the morning, rushing to me, standard 8 kid. Says, Menier, as they always call us. There were people who slept at our place. My mother said, I must tell you, you will be attacked today.
What?
Because the father was an Inkatha leader in the area. So I said, she says, my mother said I should tell you, please leave now before they come. So I left the yard. No, I think I stubbornly went to phone a school inspector about this, and he said, please leave, Mr. Taki. And I phoned him, and I then went to classes to my colleagues and said, guys, goodbye, I have to go. And as I left, there's a house in front of the school. As I turned right, there was a bus. We used to call it Imelo Yellow.
Yes, I remember, yes.
And then there's a crowd of people singing songs and carrying spears. And there had been a woman who was waving at me. And I thought he was greeting me, but she was trying to tell me not to go there. So that's how it happens, I think. And then before I knew it, I was surrounded.
Scary.
I was shot, I was stabbed, and I fought a bit. And then they carried me out into the forest close to another primary school where they would kill me. And that's how I jumped and left. And ran for the whole day, I think, and then settled down in another house, hiding until late. And I found students there that they had attacked. And that's how I sat with them for some time, but I was bleeding. I was, and I had not taken out the bullet on my leg. And so that is just how it happened. And it's a long story. At home, the police went home and told them I had been killed. So rituals were done.
Oh my God, what?
Yeah, so there's a night at home when they knew I had been killed and did everything.
Oh my.
Right? And they were shocked that I wasn't.
So the bullets...
I took it out. I took this bullet out
What?
at Bree Street in Joburg, actually, days later. Right? But anyway, it's a long story. So you're
surviving all with these injuries?
I survived that couple of 4 or 5 days and took a train, not knowing where I was going. A guy called Reggie Khatebe and Himnalim Tembo had organized that I go to Kanya College to meet Temko Singwabo, who had been a comrade of mine in college. I think he was recently head of something, parks in Durban.
Yes.
Still there.
Yes.
He organized that I took a train. That's how and they had organized that I would meet someone from the ANC so that I would leave.
Okay.
Yeah, so anyway, I stayed there until we were raided by the police at Bree Street. It's a place called Kanya College, corner Jubet and Bree Street.
Okay.
And then when that happened, I actually, from December 87 to maybe February 88, I was sleeping in the street under that bridge at, Park Station. A very nice corner there. Really, really, I loved it. That's where I still see it now. It's next to a place called Rotunda where the bus...
Yes,
there's a nice corner there you must see. You could use it. No storm, no rain, no wind. And I slept there many, many days, many nights, and would change that spot and go to different places. But anyway, I end up teaching. I was going to teach at Observatory, Brother McGurk, at a Catholic school. And when I went there, Brother McGurk told me, because the ANC had organized, some comrades had organized that I teach there before I leave. And then I went to him. He says, the police were here from Kokstad, were looking for me. So anyway, he couldn't teach me.
How did your family find out that you hadn't died?
They found out because, that's a long, long story. You have to.
I'm going to have to invite you again, Musla.
They found out because that 2 days was probably the longest 2 days of my life. Because something happened in the morning when I was leaving this house where the students were. I was attacked again. And I escaped and went to where I was staying because I realized they had attacked a woman who was unrelated to me, an old woman who had given me a room to rent.
Oh, my God.
And they had stabbed her and all of this. And I was hiding a bit and left to go to an area, some people know it as Nkwezela. And I traveled in the forest when these people were trying to look for me house to house. And I went to a house of Mr. Ngasana, who was a very good friend of mine. a colleague at the school, very, very sympathetic to the cause. I had recruited him, by the way, but he was like maybe 10 years older than me. And I was hiding there, and my sister, my eldest sister, my last sister, and their husbands were looking for a mortuary where my body was, right? So they drove around, went to Bulwer, went to Donnybrook, went to, I think, Ikopo, and they couldn't find my body. And so they decided to go to a guy called Disbongani Ngasana, to his house, to ask if he knew where my body was taken. And we saw this car. So I was hiding and they came in. That's the only time they knew I was alive. They walked in and I was hiding, and he asked them to come in. They wanted to know.
And then you came out.
And I came out. My sisters just uncontrollably.
Of course.
Yeah. So, and my mother still knew that I was dead. There were no phones. And so at home they were preparing for burial or whatever would happen.
What?
Yeah. So, but that's the story.
Kevin, what's in?
Yeah, it's a long story. It's a long story.
So do they continue pretend as if uswelekile vele?
No,
cover?
No, eventually it was known that I was alive. It was known that I was alive, but I had to leave the province in a couple of days. Himnal and Rejicha Debe had organized that I go see them in Pietermaritzburg, and then a certain priest called Reverend Land smuggled me out of the college where I had spent 2 nights. And I slept at his house, and then the following day I went to the station. I came to Joburg wearing torn shorts, some kind of half a raincoat that had been shot and stabbed and bleeding, and that's how I took the train. When I actually landed at Joburg Park Station, I was like, I had a dirty T-shirt, and I don't know why I didn't change it, but I couldn't afford it anyway. So, and that's how I end up here. And of course, eventually I ended up teaching, because I could only teach. I couldn't teach in government schools, I discovered. So I ended up teaching at a Catholic school in Soweto. And I'm 20. And that's why most people know me as a guy from Rockville in Soweto. But I'm actually
What's the school called in Soweto?
It's called St. Matthew's High School.
Okay.
That's where I taught some time, and I continued to operate in MK, in the underground, in the community there. I left. Yeah, it's a long story. And then I went back to school again. That's why people know me in student politics in the 80s and in student politics as SRC president at Wits. Most people think that was my first stint as a student leader.
Word.
It was my second stint. In fact, Chris Hani, after Aubrey Machiko and I were arrested for MK activities. Koko Machiko.
Yes.
And at the end of that, Chris actually told me, Chris Hani said to me, why don't you go back to school? And he gave me some 1,500 rand. I don't know what you would do with that, but I did register. He had bailed me out.
Incredible.
And he gave me 1,500 rand, and he said, next year, go back to school. This ANC will not always be what you guys think it is. And that's how I went back to Wits. The rest is history.
How deep is that?
Yeah.
And because we're looking at it now.
Absolutely. So it's been that journey. It's not been, so I've always lived this life. Those who know me, my siblings, and those who grew up with me know that I've always lived this life, but I've always been concerned largely, not because I'm a lawyer. I mean, I wanted to be a priest. I became a teacher, but law also became something I did by accident. I studied political science and law and English. I think I was in class with your sister actually at West.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we did literature, English 3 together or English 2. And I did all of that because I didn't know what I wanted to be. Even becoming an advocate was an accident.
What year is this?
This is now 90. You mean becoming an advocate?
Yes, when you're studying with my sister.
It's 93, 94, it's 94, 95, 96.
Okay.
Yeah, I already had been studying through UNISA, so I was left with 1 or 2 years and a couple of credits. So when I went to Wits, I had already started studying through UNISA. And then, that's early 90s. My mother and my family don't have a place to stay. Their house was destroyed. They were moving from My sister's place to Guamashu in Durban. My mother was not allowed to build anywhere. In fact, my mother was buried next to a road in 1998 because it couldn't be buried anywhere. So I had to exhume her 10 years later in 2008, bury her in, this is now post-apartheid, things are fine.
What?
So that's the setup into which I've traveled. And so a lot of people, when I say a lot of people misunderstand one's political views, I think it's because people don't really know that one has been engaging with what I call is the tragic reality of African people since I was born, right? I've been witnessing what I think is this despiritualization of the African person when I was young. And I've been watching the role of missionaries into de-identifying an African and making us dislike ourselves. And all of this. And it doesn't change. It keeps changing form. And that is why when I speak today, people get bored because they think we have freedom. And I appreciate everything else we have. But I think we do continue to dance to the rhythm beats of the status quo, most of us.
Big time.
Tragically, dying slowly and trading the future of our children because we're trying to please the status quo and to see if it can accommodate us. But generally, the colonial project succeeds not because it had military power. It succeeds because it has what I think is the most powerful force on earth, is to own somebody's mind, to change their thinking, to make them believe, as most black people believe, that they are inferior, that they must live a life in which they run away from Africanness because they think it's inferior. That, to me, is probably the more powerful than any other military force to control people. You know, my other name is Frederick. And I resent this name because I was named Frederick at the doorstep of a church because a German priest said, an African name will not send me to heaven. And that's the case with many people who are Catholics. And so I appreciate the role of missionaries. But I call them God's ambassadors who were serving colonial powers by de-educating, re-educating, despiritualizing us so that we could become subjects of white European power. And our inability now to fight is not caused by the fact that we are cowards. It's not caused by anything except this. We were despiritualized, spiritually castrated, made to believe we are inferior. In fact, we believe the races that oppressed us are superior. And we live our lives trying to run away from ourselves. We live our lives trying to impress people who dislike us. And as a result, even our leaders, our own entire political settlement, all of these things are designed with what I think is an unconscious belief that our survival depends on the continued survival of white power, and our role in society is simply to serve it. Yeah. And that is where I am at the moment. It's not that I'm ungrateful for the political settlement, but I actually very, very upset that there has been decolonization in Africa, but there has been no decoloniality.
What does that mean?
You know, decolonizing means the removal of formal colonial forces from a sovereign state. Portuguese or British, they leave the continent, they go. That's decolonization. And Africa was decolonized a couple of years ago, in fact, decades ago, since the 60s. Decoloniality is the process of undoing the damage caused to the mindset, the plunder of the wealth, but largely the distortion of an African identity into believing that it's inferior and it must serve, or that its role in society is to live, to serve whiteness, to please whiteness, so that they could claim a spot under the sun. And I think that affects even the biggest of our leaders and all of us. And there's language issues. Ngelinye ilanga ngike ngathi ngizama ukukhuluma isiZulu ecourt when I was representing Zuma, and I asked, and it was not because I was trying to be contrarian, because my client is fluent in Zulu, and he has the right to hear his lawyers speak, and it was allowed. Then when I got to court, I was told I can't. And then one ANC leader on Power FM said I was being tribalist by wanting to speak an African language.
Oh, wow. But the English, Shona?
Yeah. Yes, the answer I am saying was that. So I went to Power to say, I'm very disappointed. This was said by someone I respect and know closely, actually. And I said that a person goes to live in exile for 30 years and come out so ignorant about African identity that he can only reduce an attempt at being myself to his myopic understanding of ethnicity was a sad thing for me. And so I think that's what the task is at the moment, you know. And then so the task is to educate, to make people believe in themselves again, to make young people truly confront the inferiority complex we have. You know, if we can do that, all of us, it's an honest thing we must do. It's very difficult. My mother used to say, "Finally, we're toilet, honest." It's that kind of honesty about our fear of whiteness, our belief that we are inferior. And for every battle you take, by the way, against whiteness, black people defend it. Yeah. Because they believe that they need white approval, white validation in order to be complete human beings. This was done through the curriculum, how we were taught, the churches, and everything else about our lives. And so what I think, when I talk about decoloniality, or let's start with coloniality, I'm talking about the fundamental distortion of the consciousness of the person who's black and oppressed. And the decoloniality is the antithesis of that state of mind, to be able to believe in yourself, to live, not that we must agree as black people, no, but we must live not to please people who oppressed us. You know, I found out this morning when I was preparing to come to you, something Chief of the Xhosas said to Governor Benjamin Durban. To think that a person in the 18th century was so spot on about the battle. And he writes a letter. Benjamin Durban, who was the governor of the colonies, through a guy who was the superintendent in South Africa called Dr. Philip. They start punishment for Xhosa people who they say are stealing their cattle. Let me read you what Chief Maqoma says to them, because I can't. He says to them, the governor cannot be so unreasonable as to make our existence as a nation depend on a circumstance which is beyond the reach of human power. You sanction robbery by the patrol system. After having taken our country from us, you shut us up to starvation. You threaten us with destruction for the theft of those you have left with no choice but to steal or die of famine. So it's very early, the early days of coloniality, but it tells you that there were chiefs, there were leaders who, some of whom were killed, who resisted, who had not been affected by colonialism. or coloniality of the mind. And they fought. But of course, you know what happened after that? The missionaries and the chiefs decided on a policy that they called it friendliness policy, where the missionaries would be friendly towards chiefs and pay them salaries so that they own them. And that's how things changed and we became who we are, So,
isn't that how like Parliament pays?
Well,
today?
History repeats itself, because politics tends to be the same. There's a book I'll suggest you read. It's an English book by a guy called Jeremy Paxman. He's an old journalist. He writes about, it's called The Political Animal. And he describes politicians and what drives them. And I think the tragedy of politics in post-1994 is that it ceased to be the politics about taking our people out of bondage. And it became the usual game of politics of power. And of course, you must understand that in African countries, with the inequality and unemployment and long years of migrant labor, even our politicians, most of them, if you really look at people who fight for power, it's people with no professional options, not because of their own making. And so it's people to whom politics is not service. It's another way of making money. It's a job. And so we've been battling. And I've always said to people, we must be slightly sympathetic, because the type of activist you get when the reward is death and detention is not the same as the type of activist you get when the reward is a tender and a nice job and money. And so the type of people you get when the struggle pays is a different type of person, and you must live with that. But we must never stop the fight. We must never be driven to what I call conformity and avoidance of truth-telling. Activists in society have always been few. Every black person these days say they fought apartheid. It's not true. We were few trying to persuade people just to join a boycott. and so activists have always been few. And so it's important for us to know that even this battle for decoloniality is going to be a lonely battle, because truth-telling is a lonely path.
Yes.
And we must take our people back to their things. I'm not being Tarzan when I say coloniality succeeded because there was de-education, as I said. But there was also de-spiritualization, renaming people, renaming their places, renaming their gods, and changing what they can believe in. And once you change names of people, you change their symbols, you change their history, you've defeated them, and you can own them. And we are still owned in that way because we live, even in law, I say this all the time, we've not changed anything in law. We've just adapted to neoliberal notions of constitutionalism.
You even wear those wigs still.
We wear gowns. We're not wigs here, but let me tell you, there's a country in this continent after independence. Law students are activists when they are at law school.
Yeah.
But their activism hardly outlasts graduation. Go anywhere, lawyers actually frown upon activism. But at law school, they were activists. It's because when they get out of university, law is a study that teaches you to conform rather than to change, rather than to critique. So the ability to critique is left at law school when we are students. But once there's money, there's all of this, it teaches us to follow precedent. And so even the notions now of what law is, what constitutionalism is, it's so narrow. The world is big, ideas are vast. We've not even tapped into, apart from a neoliberal notion of a constitution, what else could a constitution be and what else could it do?
Yeah.
And how could you root it in the hearts and minds and consciousness of the indigenous people.
Yeah.
We're not there yet.
Because this constitution is not for us.
Oh, we like it because it's like Canada's constitution. But it's that affinity towards European, Western, and white notions. We think we are superior when we parrot what is white. Even about our lives, about our knowledge systems, African indigenous knowledge systems. Our universities are nothing but centers of disimagination. We've not even started to educate people for liberation and decoloniality because we are scared. We are scared to be ourselves because of what we could lose. And I think at the heart of what we must do, at the risk of being isolated, we have to start that process of educating. Otherwise, what we are doing is a journey of trivial pursuits and trading the future of our children to please white people because they have the economy. And I think history will judge us very harshly for this cowardice, betrayal of who we are.
I'm just checking our time. Sorry, because I forgot to press stop. We've got 10 minutes left. I want us to unpack, because you touched on it a little bit. Remember when you were in school and you found that class system? Now, this class system that still exists amongst Black people, even, you know, you also touched on that whole, how exiled people feel like they're better than the Africans that were here. And people who speak English feel like they're better than Africans who don't speak English. So can we...
Yeah, you know, it starts with a couple of things. First, colonialism starts with harsh military conquest. But of course, that is met with resistance. And then it develops, it takes another angle. It's a multifaceted approach. The missionaries, who did great work, by the way, but play another role. You de-educate, you re-educate, and you make people see themselves as superior to what. So it's a civilizing project, so to speak. And so people welcome it. That's why if you go to the Eastern Cape, you trace both Eastern Cape and Natal, KZN. Kunendawo zamaqobhoka nendawo zamaqaba. And you go check laba bathi bamaqobhoka. Check exactly what is it that they think makes them better. It's missionary education, Western notions of behavior, speaking English in a particular way. And the other ones across, ababizwa amaqaba, they do nothing except mind their business and live the way they want to live. They may not have gone to school, but they are still human beings. But the division starts there, and it goes on to our schools later. And once English is used as an IQ test, we are finished. So foreign ways of living our lives became a yardstick by which we judged our sophistication. And of course, that goes on. You know, I've learned, as educated as I am, I've learned to respect more deeply people who, let's not call them uneducated. Who didn't
organic intellectuals.
Yeah, I've learned to appreciate my mother and those rural women and men who didn't go to school. Because my interaction with educated people, as I do every day, leaves me depressed. Because I think it is the most educated that have been assimilated into whiteness, so much so that they are unconscious about it. Because it comes clothed in education. It comes as sophistication. And therefore, the countries, post-colonial countries, don't move forward because the so-called enlightened are probably the most damaged human beings about who they are. And so our development doesn't go forward because people like me who are educated and many others, we live our lives trying to demonstrate how un-African we are. And we live our life actually utterly assimilated into lives that are not originally and fundamentally ours. So we live false lives. And no one can be free. No country can be free and liberated if its people live false lives and are not true to themselves, and their children are taught not to be true to themselves. And I always repeat this at the expense of fighting with my own kids, that when I look at most of these white schools and what we pay, I think we pay for an accent.
Yeah, that's all.
And de-Africanization of the person. And we celebrate it. And our leaders are like that themselves and everybody else. And I'm not saying this to judge people, but I'm saying this as a task that we must, if liberation must have meaning, we must go back to each and every center, mindset, and aspect that was damaged by coloniality. That will be the beginning of the rise of the African person, their religion, their knowledge systems, their medicine, their law, how we govern society. And we were not just a place where people lived in caves. We had systems. And I'm not saying we must go back to each and every system, but we must assimilate our lives and be proud of how we used to do things. Because there's nothing perfect with Western notions. It's just that we assimilated into them and we were forced to believe that everything we know is inferior. Everything about us is inferior. In fact, the most critic of what I'm saying that you will get is not a white person, it's a black person. I'm sure the answers, tweets, what do you call them now? You will get about what I said today. It's black people.
We're going to attack.
Unhappy with a reality that we were colonized and we think white. And that's how whiteness survives. It survives by pulling a few of us to defend itself while it sits back, folding its arms. And that's how it survived. That's how we are poor. We are poor because whiteness and white resources that belong to our people are defended by formerly oppressed people who are like you and me. And they are poster boys of whiteness. And that's why they are the first ones to attack you when they think you are being arrogant to a white man. But they don't see the white man being arrogant to you because it looks normal. It happens to me all the time. When I give an answer to a white lawyer who was being arrogant, "Oh, Muzi, what are you doing?" It's because when a white man is condescending and rude to me, it looks normal. That's what they were born into. What looks abnormal is me dealing with it because I'm supposed to be subservient. Like everybody.
Yes.
And all this. And that's how, although it's individual, I'm personalizing it. But we have a political system into which Africans and black people in general are dwarfs. And whiteness is a giant. And that's our life.
Whew, that is a good place to end it at. Thank you so much. There was a river and Sidiba. There's lots to drink from. Thank you so much. I'm just sad we couldn't get into like the politics of now and like what's happening with the fixing of the rand and the silence around that.
The answers are in everything I've said to you. We forgive white crimes and condemn few little things black people do because they've been forced into becoming thieves in their own land. And we don't punish grand theft by people who've been thieving since the beginning of the 16th century.
How are we going to... Because what they've done essentially is given people bags to police us and to gatekeep us. So some of us, the sellouts.
Let's call them the poster boys of the system, of the status quo. And I think it goes up to the top leadership of this country. Yep. I think the entire top leadership of this country, and I respect some of them, but I think as a system, it's a system that lives to betray its own people.
The good blacks.
Yeah. And until we are able to really, I don't even believe elections can change this. This narrow electoralism won't change anything. The system remains the same. And people think I'm a nihilist when I say what will help is a complete collapse of this thing that we're trying to build and we're failing, and build the foundation again. It will take us maybe a year or two to start from the beginning, but it's better than the next 200 years of numbness, of nothingness, and a betrayal of the future of our children. We must decide whether we want to spend 6 months or a year of upheaval and uncertainty, or want to spend the next 200 years in poverty, inequality, and subservience.
We've got to decide.
That's the choice we have. It's up to South Africans. If they want the little crumbs that come from the table of the white elites that have money, it's fine, they can live like that. But if they want to change things...
But now they keep saying, no, it's not just white elites, it's also black elites, it's not a race.
Of course, it is a race. Anyone who tells you it's not a race has not been living here. Of course, race and class coincide. And that's a long debate about how race and class coincide. But the system co-opts people. It co-opts me. You think I want to leave my double-storied house or my nice car? No. So the system does co-opt a few of us. And that's how it survives. That's how all systems survive. And you know, there's a book, it's called Gates of Fire. It's about courage. It says, what's the opposite of fear? And many people in the book, in the novel, say it's courage, bravery. And at the end of this novel, Gates of Fire, it says, actually, the opposite of fear is love. If we loved ourselves and we loved every human being around us, all revolutionaries must have love for other human beings. That is the basis for a revolution, a proper one, is to love other people, love your country, love every human being around you. That's revolutionary. And that's courage. And that's the opposite of fear. And if we adopt that principle, we will lead our people, our country, both black and white, by the way, into a proper, truthful, liberated zone.
Absolutely.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for coming through. There you have it, guys. The revolution is love, 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 love. Thank you so much for joining this beautiful, beautiful conversation. I'm going to put the banking details there. You know, this model is a crowdfunding model so that we have more episodes. Thank you so much for your support all the time, and keep the likes, shares, and subscriptions coming. See you again next time.
Who are you when all you were has been diluted by lies and white lines cancelling out all that which has been written of your history? Why do you look at yourself as a mystery? Doesn't the sun shine because you open your eyes? Doesn't the moon stay situated within the same stars your DNA sparkles off? Your spirit knows that surely khona into e off. Buza umoya so you may return to being well off. Because spiritually you are rich, yet your ancestors cry because you are out of reach. But yours is to command all elements while God takes inspiration from the very mirror she looked at to become. Remember who you are and never finish just when they think that with you they are done.